Hello, lords and ladies of the realm. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys to the best of my ability the latest episode of Game of Thrones. We are on season 6, episode 4, Book of the Stranger. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review. And quick disclaimers if I forget any major details or insights or callbacks or what have you, anything that I failed to address in this review, I would love for you guys to bring up in the comments below. This video is just the beginning of the conversation. I say that with a lot of my vlogs, and especially so with a show like Game of Thrones that is just cram-packed and full to bursting, and I do my best to share as many insights as I possibly can. And if in fact I make a silly mistake, such as calling somebody by the improper name or misrecalling a situation, whatever, do lovingly inform me in the comments below. And also, my channel is about to break 10,000 subscribers. I'm gonna do a special video for that, hopefully sometime in the next week if I break that mark. So yada yada, let's talk about the episode together, shall we? So this episode was by and large a bit transitional. I say that not disparagingly or negatively because it's really important to have these big game-changing, gear-shifting episodes that are essentially preparing all of the key players to enter the major fray. So we also get to see a lot of brother and sister pairings across the different houses of and beyond Westeros. We have, of course, Sansa and Jon of House Stark reunited, and it feels so good. It was so brilliant to finally get to see those two characters come together, and at such a time as this, I will get into that momentarily. But yes, we have Sansa and Jon Snow. We have Margaery and Loras Tyrell, who are, well, you know, bowed and bent and broken a little bit, but still vying for something on the other side of their imprisonment by the Faith Militant. We also have Yara and Theon coming together of House Greyjoy and trying to figure out how they're going to get Yara on the throne of the Iron Islands. And of course there is at the Red Keep and King's Landing, Cersei and Jaime, who are trying to pull the strings along with House Tyrell to get the High Sparrow taken down from his high horse and to restore what they see as the proper order of things for House Lannister. So lots of brother-son duos getting ready to bring down the hurt upon their respective enemies. And in the meantime, you know, there's some floaters like Tyrion and Varys over in Meereen, Peter Baelish, who we haven't seen his pretty little face in quite some time, and the one and only Daenerys Targaryen, now the freaking queen of the Dothraki. It's about dang time. But big episode. Not always big cataclysmic moments, but all of the stuff is super ridiculously important. Now, we didn't actually get to spend time with our two younger Starks who are respectively training with a three-eyed raven and also training to serve the many-faced god, of course. We're talking Bran and Arya. I do miss them, but I think that trying to include them in the mix of things, I think that would have ended up pushing certain other revelations to forthcoming episodes, and I do think that the pacing of things was really good here. So I'm going to walk through the episode as best I can and kind of cover everything that's happened and intersperse my thoughts and analyses throughout. So we begin the episode at Castle Black, where Jon informs Ed that he intends to go south of the Wall, that he has done his duty, he gave his life for the Night's Watch, in a manner of speaking, and now his watch is ended, and it's time for him to set sail for a new life. And now, of course, that is precisely around the time when Brienne and Podrick and the one and only Sansa Stark come rolling into town. And this is actually the very first scene that Sansa and Jon have gotten together, if I'm not mistaken. I think the first scene in the entire series, so that's kind of unprecedented stuff. It's really cool to see how these characters have grown, the struggles that they have faced together and apart, and how they have matured in unprecedented ways. It's also interesting to see how over time Sansa has kind of become more militarized, and she is reared and ready to attack after the abuses that she has sustained by Ramsay Bolton and everything that has happened over the course of these mad, bad, and dangerous years. And meanwhile, Jon is actually like, you know what? My life, ever since joining the Night's Watch, has been a perpetual, unending fight. I have killed and killed and killed again, and maybe it's about time that I try out a new trade for once. Of course, we find out later on, courtesy of Ramsay Bolton, in a lovely little love letter that he sends to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, we find out that there may very well be a reason for Jon to stay in the war business, and that it is finally time to rise up and maybe, just maybe, take back Winterfell with the aid of the wildlings. So, hey, you know, talk about a little bit of providence. You make some unpopular choices, you get yourself essentially an army for another battle to come. Now, this is, of course, you know, bearing in mind that there's still whisperings of madness and death and doom and despair north of the Wall, and that is still something that is coming for one and all, but we're dealing with some other conflicts here in the meantime. But yeah, it was super sweet to see Sansa and Jon reminisce over Sansa's awfulness and Jon's perpetual sulking. You know, they get to bond over some shitty ale and food, and finally begin to discuss the plight of Winterfell from Sansa's perspective and Jon's perspective, and the two of them converge and realize that it's time for them to come together. That sort of where you go, I go situation. So happy to have the Starks reuniting. We also get a brief scene with Ser Davos and Melisandre, who now says that she serves the prince that was promised, that now no longer being Stannis Baratheon, but Jon Snow, apparently. And that's when Brienne waltzes up, completely towering over them, as only Gwendolyn Christie can. That's her name, right? I hope I didn't fudge that. Anyway, so she shows up, all up on the Red Priestess's business, and reveals the fact that she actually executed Stannis. So clearly, she's a little bit bitter about the little demon baby that Melisandre spawned back in the day. You know, she was trying to protect the guy who got offed by that black awfulness, and so she's not too pleased to be around this woman again. But we'll see what transpires there. So this, of course, brings us back to the Vale, of all places, where we get to reunite with the perpetually awful Lord of the Vale, Robin Arryn, who's a little bit older and a little bit just as obnoxious as he was the last time that we saw him. Spent a little bit too much time on his mama's teat, and he's not exactly got a enjoyable personality. But Peter, ever the delightful uncle, returns with the gift of a falcon, and also reveals his plans to help Sansa and join the fray, I suppose. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, it seems like he's kind of in on the loop now. Word about Sansa's disappearance has traveled pretty quickly, so he's now kind of in on things, but scheming as much as ever. I mean, what do you guys think are his intentions at this point? Because even though it's like, yes, let's go and help Sansa, it's got this he has this ridiculously manipulative tone, and just the airs that he puts on, and the way that he uses Robin as a pawn for his own machinations. It's like, what you really want, sir. So That all remains yet to be seen, but he is back in the business, and he's got some explaining to do to Sansa if and when their paths cross. So we switch back over to Meereen, where Tyrion is preparing to make a deal with the devils of the great cities, whose slavers and masters are funding the Sons of the Harpy and their shenanigans. So Tyrion has to confront this divide between the military complex, in which Grey Worm has been indoctrinated, and diplomacy. And going hand in hand in diplomacy and negotiations is, of course, compromise. And that is something that a great many people in Meereen are not a fan of. Even Grey Worm and Missandei themselves are extremely divided over how they are going to quell slavery and the war that is constantly threatening to break out in their city. But regardless, Tyrion and Varys do go to meet with the Masters, who are none too pleased that Dany is not in the picture, but serving as one of her ambassadors. Tyrion proceeds to tell them, to make them an offer that they can't refuse. Essentially, they have 7 years to abolish the practice of slavery, during which time the Masters will receive their due compensation so that things don't completely destabilize and dwindle into war. Suffice it to say, there's quite a bit of tension over this uneasy peace. And once Tyrion and Varys and Missandei and Grey Worm return, there is much ado over the fact that they have to, the idea that they could trust their abusers and not put an immediate end to this their horrible politics. It feels pretty reprehensible and unacceptable. But Tyrion drops quite a few truth and wisdom bombs after dealing with that situation, and reveals that he does not trust the slavers in the slightest. What he trusts is, in fact, their self-interest. And he tries to make the slavers believe that his proposal is, in fact, in their best interest. And so while Missandei and Grey Worm, speaking from their pasts as slaves, say, yo, you don't get to use these guys, they're gonna use you, Tyrion is still confident that there is a way to crush them with their own contempt for the slaves, for so many different members of mankind. He wants to use that as a weapon against them and to slowly but surely bring their regime to an end. He wants to continue what Daenerys started, and he's doing so in the best way that he knows how. And I, for one, I trust very few people in this show, but I definitely trust Tyrion to at least try to do what is best. He drinks, he knows things, he makes conversation. And yes, he will, in fact, even converse with Lucifer himself if it comes down to it. And that's exactly what he is currently doing in his position of power. So now we switch on over to Jorah and Daario, who are trying to sneak into the sacred city of the Dothraki. Jorah comes up with a slapdash plan that they are merchants selling wine, and they're trying to kind of navigate around, and they end up killing a couple of dudes, and things don't exactly go according to plan. They do, of course, end up reaching Dany later, actually very shortly after that little situation, and they try to make off with Dany as quickly as they possibly can, but she reveals that, if she's gonna leave this place, if she is going to leave the Temple of the Dosh Khaleen, she is going to do so on her own flame-tinged terms, and that she does, ladies and gents, and it is beautiful. I will talk about that very shortly. Some other stuff occurs beforehand, of course. So, switching back on over to King's Landing, you know, just playing hopscotch across Westeros. We see that Marjorie is led to the High Sparrow, and he asks her, you know, what would you do if I were to set you free? And of course she says that she wants to see her brother, her husband, her family, etc., etc., etc. The High Sparrow, ever the man of righteousness, proceeds to make this a teachable moment and says, you know, that seeking out her family means seeking out sin. Oh, but he understands what it's like to live a life of dissipation and self-indulgence, and he proceeds to speak about his past as a cobbler and the wealth that he accrued in that profession, and how eventually, you know, the more that he indulged in drink and women and what have you, one day he metaphorically and literally wakes up before dawn, and, you know, he smells the people around him underneath their perfumes, and he sees the rotting food and the waste that, you know, they're completely surrounded by. And it's at that point that he proceeds to up and leave his collection of lies cold turkey and pursue the light. And so all of this presented to Marjorie, he then, he then allows her to go and see her brother Loras. Now Marjorie, she tries to play ball, you know, she acts like she's following along and she's listening and buying into the story, but she knows that underneath it all, what the High Sparrow and the Faith Militant really want is for her to be the one to break Sir Loras down, and she refuses to be their puppet, just as she refuses to let Sir Loras crumple in on himself and destroy everything that their house could want. But Loras is not exactly game to go with Marjorie's plan. He is weak. He feels shattered and destroyed, and all he wants is for this to end, which to me sounds like, yeah, he could be fessing up to some stuff. So Marjorie does whatever she can to give him heart and courage and motivation. But when you're starving and covered in your own shit, it's a little bit difficult to see beyond the immediate here and now. He sees his needs so keenly, and all he can really do is wallow in that. So we'll see how it plays out for that brother-sister duo. We see that Cersei goes and speaks to Tommen and how she wants to crush the Faith Militant because they disrespect loyalty, they disrespect the world, they want to completely overhaul the system, and that is not something that's going to fly for Cersei. So at this point, Cersei and Jaime make a modest proposal to Lady Olenna Tyrell, saying, hey, you bring on over your little army, and we're gonna have ourselves a little civil war. Which is about the way that it appeared things were going. So they are ready to shed blood. They know it's gonna happen one way or the other. They tell the leader of the Kingsguard that he's gonna have to defer to them on this issue. And he's kind of like, yeah, the Faith Militants suck. He kind of wide-eyed and bugging out, but he knows that how otherwise are they going to bring this regime to its needs and try to restore some semblance of balance, you know, where the kings and queens can live in the light, not, you know, in the shadows, while the purveyors of the light and of faith continue to mess with the system. So that's what's going on there. Another little war for you on the horizon. So then we finally see Theon return home. Yara is none too pleased, and she quickly reveals that the source of her displeasure is the belief that Theon has come only to take power away from her after she lost the lives of men trying to rescue him. And so there's all this tension, all this anger and rage that is very quickly broken when Theon explains, like, yo, I just want to be home. You want to rule? I'm all about that, sis. What can I do for you? So he is in a very, very different place. You know, he was a bit of a bastard on pretty much every conceivable level once upon a time, but he has now had himself broken down into little bitty tiny pieces. He's ready to put himself back together and to fight for the Ironborn and just to, you know, do something for his estranged family, I guess. Good on him, I suppose. Now, we have a rather unsavory scene where Osha attempts to execute Ramsay, and it does not go in her favor. She is taken down rather quickly, and with the same knife that he uses to stab her, he continues, or well, maybe it's not the same knife, but, you know, stabs her in the neck and then keeps slicing himself an apple. So that's just, you know, the nature of the Ram Master. We switch right on back to Castle Black, where we get to see Jon, Brienne, Podrick, Sansa, Ed, and Tormund Giantsbane. You know, they're all dining together. And at that point, Jon receives the letter from Ramsay with all of the come and sees, you know, come and see what I have done, come and see your brother. And, you know, it's interesting how Jon refuses to read the rest of the letter, and Sansa snatches it from him and proceeds to spell out in plain text exactly what it is that Ramsay intends to do if his demands are not met. And so she is unafraid and unabashed, and she's ready to go to war. And Jon now sees that perhaps this is his new calling. This is why he is, you know, the chosen prince, as Melisandre puts it. So time for the Starks to come together and stage a little war of their own. And now this, of course, all leads to the tremendous, the soul-rending conclusion as Dany meets with the Khal and the Khalasar to decide her fate and whether or not she will be permitted to remain at the Temple of the Dosh Khaleen, since she has gone out into the world, she has done the unthinkable, and, well, as everybody around her is trying to decide her fate and who they could sell her to, you know, sell her back to the masters of Yunkai to get 10,000 horses, and, you know, they talk over her and the idea of prostituting her and all of that good jazz, and Dany's just kind of like, Now, I'm going to stop you there. Here is what I think. and she proceeds to, you know, spit some literal fire on her enemies and essentially dispenses of the entire Khalasar. Just like that, emerges unscathed like we knew she would. You know, this is a major callback to season 1, episode 10, Fire and Blood. And here she comes on an even grander scale than we've ever seen before. She emerges, you know, her clothes have been burned away. All of the men of power presiding over the Dothraki have been burned to a crisp. And there she is. And freaking Lion King moment, everybody is on their knees, and they know that she is the true business. That she was not merely a lot of talk, you know, like some of the other widows of the Khals were talking about, how they too thought that they would be the ones to mount the world and to have everything as their own. And no, Dany is the one with the true power, and it's so incredible to see the scope and magnitude of that expression of what she's capable of. So now, I don't freaking know, but that was brilliant. Such a perfect way to cap off the episode. It was this transcendent climax on every conceivable level. And surprisingly, her escape from the sacred city did not actually involve her dragons, nor did it even really involve Daario and Jorah, despite the lengths that they went to free her. No, it was all about her from the very start. And that's what makes it so satisfying and fun. So we see some losses, we see some threats, and we see people preparing to, as Peter Baelish says, enter the fray. That is what this episode is really all about. So thank you guys so much for sticking through my review. It has been a pleasure. Anything I forgot, please bring it up in the comments below. I love the crap out of y'all. Can't wait for next Sunday. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.